I hope you don't mind if I get fast and familiar with the microphone, but I prefer not to speak from notes because I risk making sense like Steve and Robin just did. My name is Matt Funiciello. I am running for Congress in CD21, which is the district we are all sitting in right now. I first want to thank Bill and Patty because this is just amazing. Thank you so much for opening Liberty for us. That can be a scary thing as a business owner, and it's good that you depend mostly on tourists, I imagine. Because what is the Green Party? When people start talking about a third party, an alternative party, another party, there's something besides Democrat and Republican most people are not familiar. There are hundreds of political parties in this country we've never heard about in mainstream media. And there's a reason for that. And that's that those parties actually have principles and they stand for something. They actually, many of them are single issue, many of them like the Green Party are not. The Green Party has been around since the anti-nuclear activists in the 60s, in the anti-war movement of the Vietnam era. And it was founded, as Steve said, by activists. We really only became political. We only became able to get on the ballot and run candidates in the 90s. And it was 2000, that's what most people remember about the Green Party, when Ralph Nader ran for president. And he was endorsed by the Green Party as their candidate. A lot of people felt, because the mainstream media told us this, that Ralph was running because he was vain. He was vain. I know Ralph Nader really well, and I'm not going to have a fist fight with anybody over it unless they start one. But I am going to say Ralph Nader's not vain. Ralph Nader spent 50 years working for all of us for free, out of principle, because he's a really great human being. And he had access to the halls of power. He could go to Congress, he could go to the Senate. He had allies there. Usually they were Democrat, but sometimes they were Republican as well, because there were decent, principled people who did somehow still manage to get elected into the halls of power in Washington, D.C. They weren't all corporate lobbyists yet. And that's where we're at today. Ralph was a harbinger, he was a bellwether of what is happening in our country, which is when they shut down those halls to the voices of the people, workers, people who care about the environment, people who are good parents, people who coach softball and baseball and hockey, football in their communities, people who work really hard. All of us do. We are in the working class. We deserve a party that actually represents human beings who work for a living. I often look at the candidates that are put forward by the Republican and Democratic Party, and I wonder what it is they do for a living that they can afford to campaign full time. And sometimes, like in the last congressional race in 2014 when I ran, it's quite obvious that one of them anyway wasn't working very hard at all campaigning. Not as hard as I was, and I was working 50 hours a week, making $16.50 an hour without health insurance. Because I'm a business owner, I'm a small business owner from CD21. And just like the fine people who own this establishment here, it is a constant struggle because we are the playground of the rich. We are a tourist location. Our massive resource in trees is becoming less and less important as fossil fuels certainly have long ago taken over their use as a fuel. And we are looking at our plywood and lumber products coming from Canada because of CAFTA and NAFTA and the other forms of fake free trade that Congress has implemented to, I think it was supposed to save us money and make more jobs and create trade. The problem is every time we sign one of those deals, it's a net loss of hundreds of thousands of jobs. The TPP, which is about to come through, which Elise Stefanik, our current congressional representative, pushed through with fast track. So she unconstitutionally wants to give President Obama, who also is a fan of the TPP, the right and the ability to circumvent Congress in the negotiation of this trade deal. And then Congress does get to say yes or no, but this is the same kind of abdication of responsibility we saw during the Bush administration when Democrats and Republicans stood in line to authorize the use of military force. Now, our Constitution dictates that only Congress shall declare war. There wasn't even a proper debate. The debate was about whether you should let that guy decide that we're going to go to war or not. Greens are not okay with that. Much like libertarians and Constitution Party members, conservatives, and ardent, principled Democrats, we believe that our laws are there for a reason. These are the collective rules we've all decided to live by. And when a party or a group of parties, as we have in Washington, D.C., decide that they're going to circumvent all of those laws and do whatever they would like to do and rationalize it, put a rubber stamp on it, use another signing order, this is all illegal. We have to start calling it that. It's criminal activity. How do we stop it from happening? My answer is really simple. We can wait until the Democrats and Republicans decide to level the playing field and actually have a democracy, or even a republic that is democratic in its nature, as our Constitution promises us, or we could just vote differently. But we all buy into this nonsense that when you vote for a Green, or an Independent, or a Libertarian, you are throwing your vote away. I just say, no, you're not, because you're voting for what you actually believe in. And I also don't buy into this, you can vote for somebody who kind of agrees with you. There is a candidate who agrees with everything you're talking about and everything you believe. It doesn't mean you're right, but it means you have a right to support them. And if they are elected, your voice will then be heard in the halls of Congress. It might not win, it might not prevail, but it will inspire other people around the country to realize you do not have to allow corporate America and now the multinational corporations to decide whose voice is going to be heard in Congress. Does anybody here know how many non-millionaires there are in Congress right now?
0.
Thank you. That's the right answer. Not a single one. I make less than $40,000 a year. And I would like you to send me to Congress. I don't own any asset beyond my business, which is a bakery. I brought some bread today that you are more than welcome and that I would appreciate you taking with you when you leave to show you that I do get up, not every day, but many days at 2 o'clock in the morning and bake bread. And when I don't do that, I still am putting 50 hours in at my business. And I employ 32 people, and I've done that for 29 years. I am the real deal, and by that I don't mean I'm better than other human beings. I mean I'm really a worker. I don't make much money, I live very small, I actually like to work. I enjoy it. I like the people I work with, they are my family, I love them. I love people. And the bottom line is, every time I like to call them restraining orders more than restraints, the government seems to decide arbitrarily on a regular basis what it is that business owners are allowed to do or not to do. And the problem with that is that they're taking tax money from all of our pockets as they're telling us this. And we're not dumb. We all see what they're spending the money on. So let's go over a couple of what my campaign issues are at the congressional level, and we'll look at what they're spending money on. The first one for me is health insurance. I spent my school years in Ottawa, Ontario. I had Canadian single-payer health care. Every single Canadian has it. How much money did I pay for it, Neil?
Nothing.
Thank you very much. Not a single cent. Now, the American response to that is that's not possible, and everything costs money. Of course it does. There's an amount of money the Canadian government puts aside for every single Canadian citizen to have health care. How much money is that? The last time that it was actually looked at in the Woolhandler study, which was a Harvard study done by Steph Woolhandler, who is a doctor who's been very active with single-payer movement over the course of her years in her career. She did this report with Jeff Hammelman showing that the American federal government is spending, this is 2004, the updated study, so 2004, we're spending $6,000 for every single person in this room and every single other American in public money subsidizing the healthcare system. So that's Medicare and Medicaid. It's also subsidies for big pharma. It's also helping to build your hospital you probably don't need because there's one 5 miles away. All right, it's propping up healthcare. It's paying off the amounts of money that are not covered, the bills that are going to sink a hospital if they don't come through. It's all considered economic development, but it's $6,000 per person as of 12 years ago. I'm not sure what the number is now. And the problem is you have to decipher all of the money that's being funneled into healthcare and figure out where it's all being allocated to come up with that number. What is that number in Canada is the interesting thing to think about. At the same time in 2004, Canadians had health care that by the World Health Organization, and by my estimation as someone who lived there, and it was plenty of friends and family who still do, $3,800 per person bought us better health care, period. And everybody had it for free. No one was paying a premium for it. Now what we're being told here, under the ACA, which is the Democratic answer to a lack of meaningful health care, is you guys can all have health care. It's called the Affordable Care Act. So what we're going to do is we already spend $6,000. We're going to ignore that we do that. We're going to pretend we're not spending any money at all. There's no public money being fed into the big pharma. That's a lie. We're starting with a clean field, a clean level playing field. Now we're going to spend your money to buy health care, but we're going to link you all together in doing it. Now you're workers and you couldn't afford to pay $10,000 for bad health care for your family yesterday, but now I've passed the ACA. This is what the Democrats say. So now what's changed is if you don't buy it, we're going to penalize you. And the penalties are going to go up every year. And I say, well, that's not really making it more affordable, is it? In fact, that's actually worse than how it was before, because I still don't have pardon me. I still don't have health insurance. My workers still cannot afford health insurance. We're still paying $6,000 that's being pumped out of the Federal Reserve and used to prop up these massive, profitable corporations instead of to buy you health care. And the thing that television will tell us, and most other mainstream media, is that healthcare everywhere else in the world is terrible. Then why are we number 38 on the list? When the World Health Organization makes its list of who has the best healthcare, why is every single nation that has single-payer healthcare ranked higher than we are? And every single one that is ranked higher than we are is single-payer, period. It's that simple. So what I want is I want our $2,000 back. Why doesn't Obama pass a plan that says, you can all have free health care and we're going to give you the $2,000 back we've been stealing out of the Federal Reserve? Because that's math that makes sense to me as a worker. But that's, of course, pie in the sky. That's what this is all about. It's all about pie in the sky. Is it really pie in the sky? If you were on a schoolyard and you had $6 in your pocket and the bully came over and took your $6 away and said, I'm going to go get myself some health care, and walked away, no one was going to have the fist fight? No one was going to be upset? You know, I would be upset, but I'm not sure I'd have the fist fight either. But there are millions of us in this country. I estimate that when you look at income distribution, largely, it's probably 70 to 72% of us are actually in the working class. You know, the middle class are just people who make a little bit more money than we do, who probably could actually live for 2 or 3 months with what they have saved. They have more expensive alarm clocks and they've got a BMW instead of a Ford Focus. They still will lose their job and be destitute. And that to me is not middle class. It's not what the unions built. It's not what happened after the Greatest Generation. It really is not. We don't have that kind of solidity anymore. Single payer is a huge issue for me because it mobilizes people. Healthcare is a real problem. It's especially a real problem here in CD21, and nobody has an answer for it. And that's the simple answer. There are lots of Republicans and Democrats who know that it's the right answer, but you'll never hear it out of their mouths because of the money they collect from insurance companies and from pharmaceutical companies. You know, it's really that simple. They're corporate lobbyists. They're not your representative. I would like to be your representative. And if not me, then I would like there to be somebody else who also actually cares about you and cares about workers to be elected to Congress. It's really that simple. It would be nice if it was somebody who read a book occasionally. It would be nice if it was somebody who was not a Democrat or Republican, because the pressure to behave the same way all of the rest of them do is overwhelming. Just ask Dennis Kucinich or Cynthia McKinney or Ron Paul, because those are examples of people who tried to work within the two parties and had principle, even principles I don't agree with, not all the time, but they were killed off by their own parties because they pointed attention to it. They said, those guys are taking all this corporate money and they're never going to do what we want. They said, oh, well, you're not a congressperson anymore. Who cares what you say? We have to elect people who don't take corporate money. That's number one. Greens don't take corporate money. Green candidates don't take corporate money. It is part of our set of tenets as a political party. It's the main reason why you shouldn't vote for anybody else, honestly, is my feeling. But I'm open to the idea that I'm wrong about that, but I'm pretty adamant about it. There are a few other issues I'll run through very quickly because I don't want to monopolize the time. Single payer is the most important one to me as a business owner and as a worker without health insurance. But there are other issues that matter a lot. One of them is a living wage. We are right now at a federal minimum wage that is a third of what it should be if it was adjusted for, Neil?
Inflation.
No, and I knew I was going to get you on this
You
one.
got me.
If it was adjusted for inflation, the minimum wage right now, does anybody know what it would be?
$22.75.
That's not correct either.
It was over $23 last I checked.
That, you are both talking about worker productivity, which is different than cost of living.
21.
So it would only be about $16.50 or $17 right now if calculated as a cost of living increase, so if you looked at inflation. But Howie Hawkins, who ran for governor and who is far more brilliant than I will ever be, and got us on the ballot in New York State, is a brilliant man. And he and Ralph actually worked together coming up with the numbers. When you look at worker productivity since the minimum wage was first implemented, it would be almost $23 an hour. Now, we're told all the time that American workers are lazy, that they organize unions, they do all kinds of horrid things to make it very hard for corporations to make money. And I say, okay, well, I don't really care because corporations are an idea. They're a thought process. They're on a piece of paper somewhere. They're in a computer. They aren't human beings. If they're working for me, I would like that we all make a living together. And I know that that's not representative of all business owners, not by a long shot. But I do know a lot of small business people in particular who that's exactly how they think. It is your family. You know, you're not trying to cheat and steal from them. You do recognize that when your business started and you worked 100 hours a week for years, probably making $1 an hour or the equivalent, or even losing money, that investment is worth something more than somebody you hired 20 years later. But it doesn't mean you have a right to not make an effort and an attempt to pay them enough money to have a decent life. Because that's why people work, right? $15 an hour is not either of those things, and it's what the Green Party is asking for right now, primarily because that's politically feasible. If we did that and had single-payer health care, think how much better your life would be. You could actually make a living at $15 an hour because a $4,000 payment per person in your household wouldn't exist anymore. Period. Gone. You wouldn't have to worry about being bankrupted by medical bills. Here's another thing, though, that a $15 living wage does. A $15 living wage means when Walmart and McDonald's, who are both unbelievably subsidized by the federal government, the products that are coming through, but also the backdoor payroll. Everybody who works at Walmart who's got to work 5 4-hour shifts a week, who's part-time, making $9, $10 an hour, which isn't, in this business environment, in economic environment, a terrible amount of money, really, sad as that is to say. But what happens when those people can't afford housing, and they can't afford food, and they can't afford medical care, is they are on Medicaid, and they get SNAP, and they get subsidized housing. How does that work? We all pay for it. That's how it works. My supposition is since Walmart's so profitable, why don't they just pay a living wage? And then maybe we don't have to pay for all of the oppression they are using their leather boots to put down upon the neck of their worker with. We can actually look at having empowered workers. And what that does economically is really simple. It creates wage-led growth. Most small business people I talk to, this is a very frightening idea. They're watching Andrew Cuomo and his mafia in New York City take care of the wage and work with the unions back and forth on pushing the wages up incrementally over the next 5 years. It is a nightmare because the way they've structured it, I'm in the food business, I have a cafe. I have now a wait staff that I used to be able to, if I wanted to, I could pay them $2.50 an hour. I don't. I've always paid minimum wage to my wait staff. They don't make a separate tip staff income. They make $9 an hour as of this year. That's very hard for me to pay. These are people who make $150 to $250 more each week in tips. So they're making a decent wage working for me. In our environment, in the food business in upstate New York, right now, they just changed that minimum wage from about $4.30 to about $7.50 an hour. And there are a lot of people complaining about it. mainly the people in the kitchen who aren't tipped staff and who are only making $1.50 more an hour, $7.50 and $9. And they know what they're doing in New York City. You know, Andrew Cuomo knows what he's doing. He is making friends with the unions again, and the unions are not workers anymore because we've lost our manufacturing base. The unions are actually representing a very small number of, I would almost call them political activists, who are professional. They're career activists, and they actually make a pretty decent salary, and they get good union benefits. And what they work on is actually making sure that there is some forward movement. They often do work with the Democratic Party, so we are all under the misconception that they're working on our behalf. I always say to those people, then you should be fighting for 20 bucks an hour. So that's what we actually need to live right now. And as a business owner, I would have trouble paying 20 bucks an hour right now. Our average outgoing hourly pay right now at the bakery is $14.38 an hour. And I am not the highest paid employee at my company. I do have people who make $18.50 and $20 an hour working for me. But no one makes less than $12 an hour. That's really hard to do economically. We are not a profitable business as a result. I should probably file as a nonprofit. But I believe in these things. I believe in us doing the best we can for each other. If we do that, if we pay 15 bucks an hour, my worker can now afford to go and eat at Witherby's when they come up to Schroon Lake, which they would never even think of doing right now. They probably can't even afford the gas money to come up the Northway. That's the difference, is you empower a whole class of human beings who right now don't make enough to do anything but pay their bills and struggle. And you are now going to say to them, here's a little bit of expendable income. You can actually buy things in your local community. Workers spend 98% of the money they make locally. Whereas when you give that money to a franchise or you give that money to a corporation, it's almost the adverse. About 8% of it is spent in the local community outside of the actual payroll. And 92% of it goes to shareholders somewhere else in the country or outside of it too. How does that benefit any of us as a community of people trying to thrive together? The answer is it doesn't. Aside from that, we're looking at one incredibly important issue, and that's war. And we don't like to talk about it because I have a father and an uncle and an aunt who all served in the military. My friend Danny served in the military. I have many friends who have served our country. The thing is, when we say those words, they're sacrosanct, because that always means somebody was trained to use a gun to kill other people on our behalf to keep us safe. That may have been true 100 years ago, it may have been true 50 years ago, might have been true 300 years ago. The question is it true today? Is that what we're actually spending the money on? When we say military budget, are we actually talking about training American human beings to fight other human beings in other countries because we're in danger? Or are we spending $1.6 trillion developing an F-35 stealth fighter bomber combination jet that doesn't even work as well as the F-18 or the F-16, one of which is 40 years old? You know, the answer is yes. That's what we're wasting our money on. That's a Lockheed Martin project. That's what we spend our money on. It's not the 700 military bases. That doesn't cost that much money. Not by comparison to all the military boondoggles that we engage in on a congressional level. Somebody has to go to Congress and say, why are we spending all of the money we bring in? And in fact, why are we spending money we don't even have? That's the $19 trillion deficit we have right now. Why are we spending money buying more war toys? We already spend more than the rest of the world combined. Do we really need to do this? Do we need to be the empire? Because that's what we are. We don't learn it in school. We don't use those words. That's what we are. We are the American empire. We have been since Vietnam. Do we want to continue? Is it working for us? Is it economically and morally and spiritually bankrupting our country? I would say yes. And if you elect me and I'm wrong about that, it almost does not matter, because my voice alone won't be enough to turn what Eisenhower called the military-industrial congressional complex around. You need to get other people elected too who agree with me that we should spend more of our money and focus here at home. I am arguably a pacifist, but I'm a pacifist who loves hockey, you know, and who plays it and coaches it. And I like to jam my hockey stick into somebody's ribs occasionally, just like the next guy. I like it a lot, actually. But we're in a contract when we're on the ice together. We're in agreement that it's okay to hurt each other a little bit. We're venting some steam. We're letting some frustration out. I used to be a hunter. I grew up on a farm. I was a meat cutter for a very long time when I was a teenager and in my early 20s before I turned my focused activity into baking. I have committed acts of violence in my life. I've never been to war. I've never served in the military. But what I will say is all of the people that I know very intimately and well who have been in the military agree with me about what I'm saying right now. Their experiences were one of enlightening them about just how messed up this American empire is, how backwards our priorities are. And we have to ask ourselves, are we doing this to help people in Iraq and Afghanistan right now? Are we having a $4.8 trillion war in the Middle East to benefit the people who live in Iraq and Afghanistan? What about the 12 million refugees from Syria? Are we benefiting them? Does anybody in this room think that we are? Because I don't. I don't think that's how you help people. I think you help people by bringing them food and blankets and a tent if that's all you've got. You know, but you do it because you care about other living things, other human beings. And so many people I know that I coached in hockey or baseball who were kids who now have gone into the military and come back to me after their 2 years or 4 years or their college and said, you know those things you told me before, you're right. You're right. You know, that really showed me. I probably wouldn't have believed you for the rest of my life. That this is not about patriotism. It's not about love of country. To build the strongest military in the world and impose your will on everybody else. And I promise you that the Romans, who lost their empire for two reasons. One was they overextended themselves. And I promise you the Romans did not have 700 military bases. Second reason was they lost their manufacturing base. And we did that during the Clinton administration. No more free trade, because it's not free trade. It's trade that the multinationals are manipulating so that it is to their benefit. They are just looking for cheap labor. That's what it's always been about. It's never been about anything else. You know, if you build a car factory in Mexico, Volkswagen being a great example, Volkswagen went from the United States to Mexico exactly 6 months after NAFTA was signed. And what they did was they saved an average of $2,000 in union labor per car. Did the cost of Jetta come down $2,000? No, the new Mexican Jetta was actually $3,800 more expensive. Where does all that profit go? How come there were union organizers literally killed, shot dead in Mexico in the Maquiladoros, where we have all of these manufacturing facilities and cheap labor and no environmental standards? Did the investigations find out who killed them? No, they did not. That's what we're supporting when we support fake free trade. And that's what we're about to do again, except for this newest free trade deal. The TPP is largely about being able to sell our pharmaceutical products overseas to other countries without them being able to negotiate the way Canada is negotiating right now. If you're a senior right now and you're getting cheap medication from somewhere, what's the American government trying to stop you from doing? They're trying to stop you from getting that medication from another country. So many Americans, including my mother, and my stepmother, and my father, were ordering medicine from Canada while they're on Medicare. You know, they don't want us to do it. They don't want us to do that, but the pharmaceutical companies are saying, we also want to be able to tell Canada what the price is. Well, our public money went into the research that was done at the public universities that figured out what the drug did and how it would work better and how to fine-tune it or what this new drug was. It's already all public money. And the pharmaceutical companies are just, it's a printing press for money. And what they're doing with the TPP is they are also giving up the last little shreds of our sovereignty to these other countries. Because no longer will our courts be able to decide When there is a trade disagreement between one country and the other, it will be an international tribunal or the World Trade Organization or the International Monetary Fund that will get to decide the case. So it isn't acting out of America's best interests. And I'm not saying we all should. We shouldn't all be selfish. We should be selfless. But I'm saying our government's not telling us the truth. This is not a deal that benefits the United States. It also doesn't benefit other countries either. It benefits the very small number of people who belong to the ruling class who are basically trying to further enrich themselves. And in a day and age where for every $100 you make, $30 of that is going back out the door, on average, if you were a worker, to line the pockets of somebody in a corporate environment somewhere. Why do they want more? That's plenty already. The idea is that, our tax money is supposed to go into a fund. It is supposed to be spent on things that benefit us as a collective. No wonder there are so many people who believe we shouldn't have any government at all anymore. They are independent, they are anarchists, they are libertarian, and they are saying, look at how poor a job we do when we get collectively together and spend our tax money, because look what we're spending it on. None of it is actually benefiting us. Our roads are broken. Our bridges are way too old to carry us anymore. They need to be rebuilt. We don't have bike lanes. We have third world infrastructure when it comes to telephone, fiber optic cables, all of these things. When they build these things in India, they're building them with brand new technology. We need to refit the entire country. Green New Deal is something I would love for you to look up online after tonight and look at some of the details. But if we just tried to rebuild our energy infrastructure in this country, there are probably about 16 million jobs that, much like the WPA during the Roosevelt era, could be implemented here in the United States. We could have full employment. But we have to understand that we do have to shift some of that money that is being spent on war and corporate profit over to actually benefiting the people who live here in the United States with us, who are fellow citizens. I apologize for going on so long, but I really appreciate the time and I appreciate you all coming out tonight. There is wonderful food over there. I know because I was able to eat 2 or 3 items of it, even as a vegan. And I also want to again thank Bill and Patty, because this is amazing for you to have done this for us. Thank you. I want to encourage you all not only to vote green in November, but also to get involved in the 3 campaigns that are on right now, or to consider running for office yourself. And I also would like to thank Steve and Robin for stepping up this year. That's a really big deal. I know, because when I did it in 2014, it was very terrifying. But it's been wonderful so far this time around. I want to thank you all for showing up tonight. I'm going to hand the microphone back over to John, and I believe he's going to allow some Q&A. Thank you.